My next guests are no strangers to the Capitol Tonight set. They are our insiders, veterans of New York's political scene who join us each week to break down the latest news from the Capitol to the campaign trail. With us tonight is Bob Bellafiore, a former press secretary to former Republican Governor George Pataki, who is now a senior partner at Eric Mueller & Associates, and a blast from the past, Steve Greenberg. He served as press secretary to former state controller H. Carl McCall. He is now the president of Greenberg Public Relations and a spokesman for the Siena Research Institute. Gentlemen, it is nice to have you back here. Have the gang all together again.
Great to be back on this set.
Here in a year, and she insults you already with gentlemen.
Yeah, well, I'm used to it.
I was actually just looking at Steve.
What's the saying? You insulted him already.
Okay, let's get started, shall we?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll start with you because you're back and probably raring to go.
Absolutely.
So furloughs.
Furloughs.
And the fight that we are seeing now, does this improve the possibility that we might get a budget deal or actually worsen it?
I actually think it's almost, in a bizarre sort of way, irrelevant to the budget discussions. The issues that they have to confront between the Senate and the Assembly, forgetting the governor for the moment, but trying to reach a two-way deal in the legislature, the issues are so great that this issue is almost irrelevant to the budget discussions. When they have to close a $9 billion budget gap, when there's education cuts, Medicaid and health care cuts, when the Senate is looking to do property tax relief, this is an important issue to the 100,000 members of the state workforce, no question about it. This is an important issue for the unions. And this is an issue that's getting a lot of attention, but it's not a big issue in terms of getting the budget done.
Okay, but it puts a deadline, right? It says, we say now, all right, furloughs, enormously unpopular with both the state employee unions and, well, all of the state employee unions. It's going to take effect on May 17th. So if you want to risk really angering the state employee unions, and we can see that they're already furious, by May 17th, if you don't have a budget deal, that's when this goes into effect. So it actually puts a line on when there's a deadline for making people really angry. You're shaking your head.
No, there are no lines in the sand in Albany. I mean, everything is a line in the sand, then it gets washed away by something else. This line in the sand will get washed away by the court process. The unions will sue over it. They'll get a restraining. They'll get a restraining order or an injunction or not. And if they get a restraining order on the furlough program, then no furloughs will go into effect on May 17th. So it doesn't really mean anything.
But it'll go out to the 11th hour, just like that legal battle did over the lieutenant governor, which in fact the governor referenced today when he was discussing this
issue. Which just makes it part of the theatrics of the Albany budget. I mean, Steve is half right? The legislature's got a trouble making a two-house budget.
That's generous.
I think the Senate's got a problem making a one-house budget. I have a very difficult time, John Sampson does, getting 32 votes on any one budget, because this is a terrible situation to be a politician when you're in the business of making people happy. Nothing on the table right now will make people happy. They are like carnivores at a vegan buffet. There are no good choices. And they have a very difficult time getting through this.
Okay, so then I feel like I keep asking this question over and over, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do we break the logjam, and when do we get a budget, or do we not get a budget at all?
For 20 years, I have heard, ooh, this could be the year when there's no budget in Albany, and I've never believed it. This year, I believe it. I believe there's a very real chance that we don't see a budget till after the November elections, because Bob touched on the point a minute ago. How does John Sampson get 32 votes, which includes 3, 5, 6, whatever the number you want to identify, marginal Democrats who are fighting for their elective lives this year, very liberal members from New York City, and then, you'll excuse me, but some of the more crazy members of his conference? How does he craft a budget where he can keep all 32
of them? Nothing said here is endorsed, by the way. I just want everyone to know. It's just Steve saying Steve things.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But how does he keep all 32 members together on any budget
plan? Right, but
plan?
that's actually interesting, because let's assume that he can't. Let's assume that there is no budget. That's fantastic. It's an election year. Really? In a very difficult year for already when incumbents are having, from polling, incumbents are in trouble all across the board. That's an insane election strategy to have no budget and further inflame the people around the state.
I don't disagree. I'm not sure incumbents are in trouble across the board, by the way, but that's a different issue. The real question is, and Siena will be polling Senate districts like we did 2 years ago. We haven't started yet, but I bet you that Senate Democrats and Republicans are polling the question of what's better politically for them, whether it's Brian Foley or Darrell Albertine or any of them. What's better for them? No budget to face the voters with, with, or a budget where they voted to cut $1 billion in education, to raise revenues, to cut $1.5 billion out of health care? What's a better option when they go before the voters?
Well, what is the better option?
Well, I mean, no, but I don't really know. That's why I'm saying this is something with very tough choices. If you're Brian Foley, or if you're a marginal Democrat from a suburban area, and you're looking at big cuts or borrowing more money, putting the state further into debt to pay operating costs, both of them are lousy choices. So I think the thing to do when there's a lousy choices, put the choice off.
Punt. Yes.
Yeah,
punt.
you're right. It's just a continual punt formation. Push this thing past November.
Go back to something you said early on, that May 17th is a line in the sand. I'm not buying that either, but my real thought here is, what does the governor do in next week's emergency appropriate bill? This week he put in furloughs. What does he try next week? Does he put in the soda tax next week?
Well, he might.
Does he put in wine in grocery stores the following week? I mean,
and then he could slowly I see where you're going with this. He gets his budget done the way he wanted it, just by forcing them to do it in the extended. That's brilliant.
And legislators don't want to vote for the soda tax. We know that it's very unpopular with the voters. Sienna's polled that 3 times and found it unpopular. We know that the legislators don't like it. What happens if he puts that in? Are they willing to shut down government over the soda tax?
So let's turn for a second then, because when you talk about polling, it's also really about politics. That's what this whole year really is about,
no
honestly.
Question.
So we saw also this war erupt, really, between Labor, and it's been a long time coming, but between Labor and the Senate, right? We have Labor targeting 2 downstaters, that's Craig Johnson and Jeff Klein, with more to come. They're going to target the marginals. You mentioned Brian Foley. I think they've got Darrell Albertine on the list. They have Jose Peralta, the newest member of the Senate, on the list. What is going on with this fallout, and what does it mean?
I think if the union, it's a very interesting tactic that they're laying out there, because personally, I don't think that tactic is about November. I think the unions attacking marginal Democrats is about the budget vote. And they think that they will bludgeon them into voting their way on the budget, and then maybe support them later on or stay neutral in their elections in November. I don't think for a minute my Republican friends are going to hate me for this, but I think Democratic control of the state Senate is a force of nature because of the change in demographics in these suburban districts and upstate districts that have been traditionally for 150 years been Republican are now becoming Democratic. And I think if the unions are have the same kind of reading of the tea leaves that I do based on polling from Steve and other people, I think they'll see that, look, the Democrats are going to be the ones who control the Senate, if not this November, then next November, with special elections and retirements and other things that will happen. So I don't think they're looking at a November strategy by beating up the Democrats. I think it's a strategy to win the budget vote.
I think that's very likely. I also am not sure, looking at the bigger political picture, how much is it going to hurt Craig Johnson in his district, in suburban, fairly wealthy district in northern Nassau County? How much is it going to hurt him that he's being attacked by labor unions? When the Republicans attack him and they go after him and say he's too liberal, one of his defenses is now, yeah, but I got attacked by the unions. How liberal do you think I am that the unions were attacking me?
Right. And when the AFL-CIO starts representing wealthy litigators in Garden City, then Craig Johnson may have a problem. But at the moment, I don't think law firms and Wall Street bankers are part of the AFL-CIO.
So you actually think that this is a short-term strategy. Actually, everyone probably in Albany is only thinking maybe a week ahead at this point. Because I'm not so sure necessarily. I mean, can anybody actually think forward to the election when things are so mired? And if you agree with what you've actually suggested, that there will be no budget, that means we come back every single week. You're not on the campaign trail. The governor will just keep bringing people back to pass extenders. Unless
at some point down the road they figure out a way to talk the governor into sending up a 2-month extender or a 3-month extender.
Well, why would he do that? Because he manages to be relevant for every week the way that he's got it rigged now. Otherwise, he's not relevant. He's a lame duck.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is he's no longer governor in 7 months no matter what he does. I don't know what happens. I mean, the problem I see as an outsider or an insider outsider looking in is...
Change the name of the segment now.
I don't see the end game. I'm not sure. Normally in a normal budget year, even in a bad deficit year, you always saw the end game. Okay, this side will give a little bit here, this side will give a little bit here, and they'll figure out a way to get it done.